Welcome to Firsts in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write fantastic fiction. I'm your host, Aaron Gansky, author of The Bargain, The Hand of Adonai series, and Firsts in Fiction.
Not only is it your first stop for writing fantastic fiction, it's your second stop also. I'm Alton Gansky, a writer of novels and book-length nonfiction.
Pops, I just finished the quarter at the school where I teach, and I always have my AP kids do novel annotations. And one of them chose to annotate your book. And he managed to get through it, barely. So
he'll get over it.
Yeah, that's high praise. I just wanted to pass that along to you. Yeah. So he just read the scroll actually. So, and he did enjoy it. I was being facetious. He did enjoy it. So,
yeah, that one actually, that idea came from someone else. I was supposed to be the ghostwriter, but they put me on the cover also.
Yeah,
with that. So.
It was kind of funny because I said, "Oh yeah, my dad wrote this book," and they're like, "What?" Like you couldn't tell from the last name. I mean, her last name is not Smith. You know what I mean? Right. So anyhow, hey, thanks for joining us. It's you're probably listening to us on audio. If so, just a quick reminder: you can find us live every other Tuesday night at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where you can join in our chat room at aarongansky.com. And there's a little link there that says Firsts in Fiction Live. We got a room tonight full of some devoted, continuous listeners. So hello, room. Thank you for listening. If you're watching this later on YouTube, please don't forget to push that thumbs up button and click on the bell icon so you get notifications whenever we upload. I'm probably forgetting something, but I think that's all the social media stuff. I don't social media very often. So I think I've covered all my bases. Did I forget anything, Pops?
No, and I'm sort of anti-social media.
I like it. It's appropriate too. I'm anti-social media, but you might just be anti-social media.
That's right. It depends where you put the emphasis on the right syllable.
Exactly.
I mean, the emphasis on the right syllable.
Yeah. Well, tonight we're going to continue on with our look. I'm sorry, I'm distracted. I'm getting a phone call. Our look at 10 things that 10 things that mistakes we've made, or things that we love about writing. In this case, 10 things that we love about writing. And I'm actually going to throw a little bit of a curveball here, Pops. I'm going to let you start because I'm getting a phone call that I got to take. So less than convenient. My apologies. But I'll let you start off, Pops.
All righty. Well, hello, everyone, and everyone in the room. Good to be here. And while he chats on the phone with it's probably a pizza delivery or something like that, if I know my son, we've been looking at 10 things for this, 10 things for that. And tonight we're looking at 10 things I love about writing. We'll let you guess what the next one's going to be about, which will be, if you haven't already guessed, 10 things I hate about writing. So we'll be doing that in 2 weeks for our next video cast, our podcast. And so what we have here is Aaron and I have selected each 5 things that we love about writing, and we're going to kind of go back and forth and share those, kind of like what we did in the last podcast. So for me, one of the things I love about writing is this idea of exploration. I've long taught that fiction is exploration. It's about experience. Where nonfiction, and I've written a good bit of that, nonfiction is often education or edification building up the reader, and education, of course, is giving them information and how to, or maybe history, whatever it might be that you're writing. That's the nonfiction portion. But for the most part, fiction, novels and short stories are exploration in which the reader explores vicariously through characters the world and the characters that you present to them in your writing. So for me, fiction is exploration with imagination being a sailing ship. It can be really anything depending what I'm writing. So it could be a sailing ship, submarine, rocket ship, cattle ranch, whatever. Doesn't really matter. Creating story allows me to go just about anywhere. And that's been half the fun of writing. Someone once said to me, said, I couldn't do what you do. I said, what do you mean? He said, sit at a computer all day long and, just stare at a screen. And I've had to share several times over that that's what it looks like I'm doing, but I'm not really there. I'm someplace else. I'm someplace else because I'm writing. So in my writing career, I have been able to go anywhere, be anyone, experience anything that I wanted. So through my novels, I've been to a hospital where patients are miraculously healed and the healer hides out, very mysterious. I've searched for the Ark of the Covenant in Ethiopia and other places, the Greek islands. I've been a doctor, I've been a mayor, I've been a pastor, I've been a structural engineer, I've been a college football player. Yeah, that was one of my fictional books. You can figure that out for yourself. And I've been a woman. That was quite a treat to write from a woman's point of view. Did several books that way. I've been an NSA agent. I've been an astronomer, a Navy captain, and just so much more. That's half the fun of writing fiction, is this idea of exploration. So I get to explore different areas, different situations, different worlds through the writing of fiction. So sometimes I think I became a writer so I could play pretend as an adult. When you're a kid, you play a lot of pretend. I certainly did with that. And I think sometimes I became a writer so I can continue to play pretend and then get paid for it at the same time. So who knows what motivates us?
Indeed.
I read a short story. I'll share this with everyone. Long time ago, short story about research done on why little girls play with dolls. And after the research was all done, what they discovered was little girls didn't play with dolls to learn to become mothers. They became mothers so they could continue to play with dolls.
But
a little twist. That's all it was. So,
yeah, that's interesting. That was riveting, Pops. Last half of that I got to catch there. I do apologize for that, Dave. Thanks so much for putting me on blast in the chat room and teasing me about getting a phone call in the middle of a podcast. But I did have to take care of some business, so I just had to do a quick little 200-yard sprint and back. Not bad for an old man. But exploration is absolutely one of the things that I love best about writing as well. In fact, while you explore the known world, I tend to like to explore new, fantastic worlds, brave new worlds. I like to seek out new life and new civilizations. I like to boldly go where no one has gone before. I feel like I should write that down. That's pretty amazing.
That's pretty clever. Yeah. You could never be sued for that. Yeah.
Probably not. It's not in print, so it's fine. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, C with a little circle around it, Star Trek. Yes, one of my favorite shows. I like building the worlds and exploring them. And that's one of the things that I loved best about my Hand of Adonai series was creating a fantasy world where I've got a forest of trees that sprout blue leaves instead of green. You can't tell the difference between the leaves and the sky. I like, there are volcanoes and there are monsters and there are monasteries and there are castles. And there are small huts and villages. There's all sorts of wonderful things to explore. And it's to be able to craft that and do some research as you do, Pops, in the real world, but taking influences from a variety of sources and creating something new is just something that's like super satisfying for me. I love being able to study maps, fantasy maps, and try and find some commonalities and some differences. And how can I, pay homage to this particular genre, but also challenge it in some way, challenge the readers to see something different, to give them something new, to give them a different flavor on a dish that they're used to eating. Everybody's had pizza, but Little Caesars is not the same as Round Table. We can all agree that Round Table is far superior. If you disagree,
this podcast is brought to you by Round Table Pizza.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't have lunch today, so I'm a little hungry. But in presenting something to them, the way that you plate this dish, see, I use food metaphors way too much. I should probably be 800 pounds by now. The way that you plate the dish, the way that you prepare, the sauce is a little bit different. The crust is a little bit different. It's still very much pizza, but each pizza can be kind of its own unique experience. And I like that. I like crafting worlds and really kind of thinking about how the politics work, how the economy works, how the magic system, if there's a magic system, how that works. I love kind of the idea of discovery of these new worlds. And I used to play with Legos as a kid. Pops, you're talking about playing pretend. I used to play with Legos all the time as a kid, and I just loved building new spaceships, new vehicles, new castles, whatever it was. Just that realm of imagination is really satisfying. So that's probably the thing that I most love about writing.
I stepped on a few of those Lego creations of yours, I think, barefoot.
Those were Lego traps that I had designed.
Little Lego bear traps and
little Lego bear traps. That's how you catch a bear in the forest. They just step on a Lego and oh, there it is. There he is, Bill. Shoot him. So, yeah, but that was good. Do I need to do my next one now so that we can be back?
No. we'll just confuse the people who pick up the notes.
Yeah.
I say the next thing I love about writing is the education that comes with it. Now, I'm not talking about the education it takes to become a writer. That is, and you can educate yourself doing that, though that is certainly true, and that was enjoyable, though some of it was a bit arduous as I was learning through mistakes. But anyway, but the education it takes to write believable fiction, especially in the kind of stuff that I have written. So there's usually a lot of research. I know I have a very thick binder on Antarctica because I had a story take place in Antarctica, one of the Perry Sachs books. And then later in the Harbingers, we ended up at Antarctica. That's just kind of the way the others directed the story. So I already had all that research. So that was nice for me to have that information. But the education is very important, especially for me. I just finished teaching last night another class at the master's program at FPU. And one of the things we had the students do, and that I did myself, was go through a Gallup, it's called a Clifton survey, where you ask a bunch of questions. You have a very short amount of time to answer all these questions, and it tells you what your strengths are. It's a strength test. Are you good at this? Are you good at that? And I thought, first time I'd done that, I thought it's kind of silly because I don't think you can do that through a series of questions. And doggone it, if they didn't nail me. Absolutely. They gave me the top 5, and all 5 of them were spot on. And one of them was this idea of education, learning new things, dwelling on new things. So I think that's one reason I enjoy that so much. But it's also one of the reasons I read. I enjoy the education that comes with it. And let someone else do the research for a change. No one writes a story without learning something. You just can't write a novel. You can't write a short story, usually without learning something in the process. So as an example, I was asked to do a piece of flash fiction a long time ago for a magazine that specializes in flash fiction. And they're very generous and gave me 1,000 words. For a novel writer, 1,000 words is, it takes that long to warm up in your writing. But I agreed to do it. And back to Antarctica, I decided to have this Navy cargo plane crash in Antarctica under unusual circumstances. Well, what that meant was I had to know something about Antarctica. Fortunately, I had some of that research, but I still had to go back over it. And then I needed to know something about Navy cargo planes, which provide supplies to some of the research facilities in Antarctica. But this was also set in the 1950s. So I had to find out about 1950s Navy cargo planes so I could get the right plane, the right dimension, and that sort of thing, how many people would be on board, the size of the crew and stuff like that. So in the process, I got to learn all of that. And I really loved that. I did a book that had the space shuttle in it. Zero G was the name of the book. And I had to learn an awful lot about the space shuttle, how it's flown, can they fly it from the ground, that sort of thing. A lot of different things. So that's half the fun, is learning that and then using a different part of the brain to weave it into a story. So I would say the second thing of my 5 that I really love about writing is the education I get out of it.
Mm-hmm. And Pops, I'm sure that you find this to be true. When you research like that, that's information that stays with you even when you're done with the project, right?
Right. And sometimes you can reuse it in something else. I had to cut down a book one time because it was too long for the publisher. They asked me to take out 2 of every 5 pages so they could get it down to the size they wanted. Horrible piece of work initially. I mean, the first book was really good. The first rewrite was horrible, and I had to go back and do it, I think, 2 more times before I got it right. But it was very difficult to do. But I had a couple of my favorite scenes in there I had to take out. But I don't throw anything away. I did all that research, so I just cut it out of the book and I put it into a special file. And I think maybe 2 years later, 3 years later, I resurrected that scene, put it in another book. Changed a few things, the setting and stuff, but for the most part, it was the same kind of ship, and basically the same part of the world, and all the statistics for that had remained the same. So yeah, you keep that stuff.
Yeah, I've always found that when doing research for a project, that the information definitely stays with you. It's you can go to a class and learn things, uh, but the more I teach and the more I learn, and the more I realize that it really takes an active role on the part of the student to learn something. And when you're looking something up on your own, not because it's a class project or whatever the case may be, that information is really going to stick with you. Um, I was in a college class and turned in a paper, and the response was, there are too many comma splices, fix them and turn this back in. The professor didn't even grade it. And so I went to him and I said, well, what's a comma splice? And he said, figure it out, fix them, and get it back to me. So I did. I still know what a comma splice is. I'll never forget it, because I had to figure it out. I had to go back to my own writing. I had to find each instance of a comma splice and, ask myself, is this a comma splice or not? And that process has stuck with me this entire time. And so I try and impart that to my students. And it's one of the cool things about seeing so many people here in the chat room, and so many of you who tune in later and watch the show on your own time. You're actively researching how to become a better writer. And that's going to pay off. That's stuff that you're going to remember and keep with you. So really powerful stuff.
Yeah, well, and the other side of that is, we talk fiction mostly on this podcast. So if you're saying wanting to learn to write a short story novel, doesn't really matter. You read other people's stuff, the published people that have done that. That in itself is an enormous, enormous education to be able to do that, to study how they did it, even learn if they did something wrong, so that you don't fall into the same trap. So that's fun. So your reading now becomes not just enjoyment reading, but also education. So I love that part of the education also.
Absolutely. Reading is definitely a fun part of it. Other things that I like about writing is meeting really awesome people, specifically my characters. Now, I don't like every character that I create. I think it's important to create some characters that you don't like, but every once in a while, you'll have a character that really surprises you. For me, my favorite character I've ever written is Erica from the Hand of Adonai series. And those of you who have read the first two books, be patient. Books 3 and 4 should be out at some point, eventually, I imagine. But you've probably come to really appreciate Erica as well. And that's one comment that I hear a lot from readers, is that her story is really she steals the show, especially in book 2. Book 1, she's neat and you like her. In book 2, you find out a lot more about who she is as a person and why she is that way. And she just kind of takes over. And it's just, every scene is fun to hear her kind of snarky commentary, but also there's a certain vulnerability to her, but she's still tough. And she's a very complex character. And I like that about her. And she's one, I think I enjoyed it because I got to know her as I wrote the series. There's a lot of characters like that. In The Bargain, I had a character named Veronica who was supposed to just be a bit part, one-legged waitress. It was kind of a throwaway line that I was using as kind of a quick joke. But she kept, I would say, walking back into the story. I guess hobbling back, limping. Well, she kept coming back into the story. And the more she was there, the more she kind of asserted herself, not in a way where she's like taking the story over, but just her presence was definitely felt. And these people are like really cool. They're fascinating. I love hanging out with them, and finding out their heartbreaking stories, and giving myself little challenges to figure out their past, giving them a mystery that even I don't know, and writing until I figure out what that mystery is. It's a lot of fun. You get to share their hopes and their fears with them. It's really invigorating. In the same process that you go through when you're reading, where you empathize with a character, you kind of step into the skin of the character, you become the character, you walk alongside the character, depending on the point of view and things of that nature. You are exposed to an incredibly wide variety of people, characters, personality types, life experiences, backgrounds. Um, just it's really interesting to kind of not just to craft these characters, but to kind of live with these characters, especially when you're doing a series over a long period of time, over several books. So that's one of the things I really like.
And characters become so real to the writer at times. I think we were out. I think it was our family that was out to dinner, and I saw one of my characters in a Sizzler working there, and I couldn't figure out why she was working there, because she was a professional, and then I realized I wasn't seeing really my character. That was my imagination took a giant leap there. Actually, it was kind of startling when that happened. So characters can become very real to the writer, and that's half the fun. And I've heard many writers, especially professional writers, talk about missing some of their characters. They're just the series of books, so it's over, or that book's gone, but they still miss the character and writing about the character. And then sometimes characters surprise you. In my book Enoch, I had supposed to be a walk-on character, and I couldn't get rid of him. He kept showing up. I kept thinking, well, I got to do one more scene with him, because I got a loose end here. I don't want to leave that hanging. The readers will be confused if I leave that hanging, so I'll do another scene. Turned out, that's the only time it's happened to me. Turned out the book was really about him, not who I thought. And so he was really the central character. That's why he kept elbowing his way in. Well, subconsciously, I think I'd figured that out, but I did not recognize it consciously for quite some time. And that's when the book took off for me. I'd been struggling with it, and that's when the book took off for me as a writer.
Yeah, I remember being in Brett Anthony Johnston's class, and he was saying something similar. I'll paraphrase, and hopefully I'm getting this correct, but something to the effect of, if you write a short story about a boy going fishing, and by the end of the 20-page short story, 17 of them have been about the fish and its struggle. Do you need to go back and excuse me, revise so that you can highlight the character of the boy? Or do you need to go back and revise so that you can highlight the character of the fish? And what his point was, you've really written a story about the fish. If
Right.
the fish asserts itself, if the character in Enoch asserts himself, if Erica asserts herself, if Veronica asserts themselves, that's what you want to run with. They're doing it for a reason. And we can get into the psychology of this and why that happens and why it's surprising to us as writers and all that kind of stuff. But I tend to believe that, and I've said this before, as strange as it sounds, as bizarre as it sounds, that I like to think that our stories and our characters exist somewhere in the ether, and that the process of creation for myself as a writer is less about actual creation and more about discovery, pulling it from the ether and shaping it and molding it, rather than simply building from the ground up. But characters will do that sometimes. And I think that's a very important thing to go with it and to allow it to happen.
Yeah, I have to be open to change. Even those who outline in detail have to be open to the fact that their subconscious may want you to change. There's something else going on back there. You could kind of feel it tickling your brain. But if it requires a change in your outline, then that's what you change. It's the story that matters, not whether or not you put 30 hours into doing the outline. You can always change the outline some. So that happens really more than most people know. Non-writers, these things just come out of nowhere. Again, we've mentioned Dean Koontz, who talked about Odd Thomas. Came to him as just a line, and that's ended up being a whole series of books. Well, he hadn't been thinking about that; it just came to him. So there's really a lot of that stuff that can change things that come from your characters. Characters can be very surprising to the writer.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads me to my next point of the things that I love about writing, and that's the process of discovery. It's pulling the story from the ether. It's discovering the shape of the story. We've heard the example of discovery writers. It's like driving at night with your headlights on. You can't see all the way to the end, but you can see far enough to get you to the next point, or to get you through to the end eventually. And I really subscribe to that idea, or ascribe, or I scribe it muchly. Anyhow, I appreciate it. Stephen King talks about in on writing, he talks about the story is like it's like a fossilized dinosaur skeleton, and we're archaeologists. All we're doing is brushing off the sand, and we find a bone. Well, that's interesting. That's our hook. That's what we want to know. What is this connected to? And so as we go through the meticulous process of sweeping away the dust and digging away the excess dirt, etc., to find the shape of the story, the bones of the story. That's what writing really is. It's more digging and brushing sand off than it is necessarily, again, the straight up creation. But if you think of it in that regard, the story even then is just bones. And so the process of revision, which is not one of the 10 things that I love about writing, even though it didn't make the list, but it is something that I do love about writing. That process of revision is the process of putting on the muscles and the tendons and the organs and the skin and making everything work together, making everything look good and function. But I believe the bones of the story, for discovery writers at least, exist long before we start thinking about it. So that process I really enjoy. I love finding out where my story is going to end. I love writing the end because it's like, I had no idea we were going here. Now I have to do a lot of revision to make everything make sense, but I have all the bones and I know how they fit together. And so now all I have to do is go through and put on those tendons and the muscles.
That's why I described the first draft as being your laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
Laboratory is where you're going to do your experimenting on that. And that's really what the first draft is. Not to get too hung up, just get through the story. You mentioned Stephen King. Stephen King and I think it's his book on writing. Anyway, it talks about the boys in the basement. He describes the boys in the basement, referring to his subconscious as being these guys who wear dirty jeans and white T-shirts with a pack of Marlboros rolled up in the sleeve. And when he gets stuck and he's not sure what to do, these guys march up the stairs out of the basement, kick the door open, and come in and solve the problem, then go back into the basement. And sometimes you just have to be open to that. And that's what happens when we have characters who suddenly appear that become not only just, they're not incidental, they're very important to the story. We just couldn't see it. We couldn't see that far when we started. So, yeah, some good stuff there. One of the things I really love about writing is the emotional thrills and the demands of creativity. It is at times a lot of fun to write, especially when it's going great and you're in the zone and you're just plowing away and it's all coming out and you just know it's gold from beginning to end. And then there's the other side of that where nothing's coming out. It's like getting a root canal. And to be creative requires now discipline. You're going to sit down and you're going to be creative, whether you feel like being creative or not, because it's your job as a writer to get this story. And sometimes you have to beat the whole idea for a while until something good comes out of it, like tempering a knife or something like that on an anvil. So, but there's the great highs, and I'm more emotional when I write than I am in most of my life. I believe a writer should be able to write himself or herself into tears and also have a good laugh with his characters, or her characters. It's the emotions there. And if you're not feeling emotions while you're writing, then this is my opinion, but I think you're doing it wrong. Okay. Because if you don't feel the emotions, your reader's not going to feel the emotion. So it should be changing you too. So there's this whole thing of balancing art with craft. There's really a difference between art and craft. A woodworker can make beautiful furniture, and that's an art, but that's in the design. The craft is making the furniture. Same thing with writing. The craft is the writing of the book, putting the words in the right place, making sure you're alternating long sentences and short sentences, that you're not going on too long, that it's trimmed, that you've taken out the clutter and all of that kinds of stuff. But the art is something far more ethereal than that. And sometimes you just have to look at it and then start working it, or it just comes to you. But putting the two together, now that's fun. That's enjoyable. We see the art, but also now you bring your craft to it. So when I was doing woodworking as a hobby for a while, one of my favorite parts was, I don't really like sanding, but when I was sanding where I could get it nice and smooth and you get it all cleaned up, and you put that first coat of stain on it. Boy, that is just great. It's a very beautiful thing, but it takes a lot of work to get to that before you get to that part. So, um, struggling is part of it's a unique part of my storytelling. I have to wrestle with this stuff from time to time.
Absolutely. And I would agree with that. There's a lot to it. There's that those emotional ups and downs, celebrating with your characters when they are victorious, and weeping with them when they're not. And I don't know that I've written myself necessarily into tears, but I've gotten to the point, especially on revision, or if I'm listening to it on audio or whatever the case may be, where I'll get to a certain part and this is really tough. Your throat kind of tightens up and you start sweating through your eyes, those types of things. And
wait a minute, sweating through your eyes.
Yeah, no, I don't.
It's a euphemism, isn't it?
No, I don't cry. I'm sweating through my eyes. That's all it is. It's just hot in here. Sorry.
Especially around my eyes.
Yeah, exactly. My eyes are really hot right now. So, but yeah, there are some definite moments there that I've hit. There are some that are kind of occurring to me right now where just highly emotional moments of high tension and conflict, and those are the moments that you really kind of live for. Those are the ones that live on with you, that you kind of internalize. So, of course, that it's going to eventually be okay, or that it's not. I mean, you're the writer, so you know where it's going, but you know how the story ends. But being able to put yourself in the position of your characters and empathize with them at those moments is, it's very satisfying. So.
I think another part of what I was trying to get at with what I was talking about is this idea of trying to make my next work better than the last work.
Yeah.
One of the hardest parts, especially when you're first learning, you're doing your first stories, your first books with this, is that you're a better writer at the end than you were at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you have to go back to the beginning and use that better writer technique to make it kind of smooth. But my goal is always to write a better book than I've written in the past. I don't always make that, but it's still my goal to make sure that this next book, this next story is going to be it. It's going to be the best thing I've ever written. And sometimes it's not, but that's the goal.
Right. Absolutely. We're always trying to get better, faster, stronger, harder, better, whatever that is. So another thing that I like about writing is meeting really awesome people. Now, when I said that at first, the room immediately chimed in and said, "Oh, he must be talking about us. These were the wonderful people that he's met." And then I said, "It's my characters." And they were all like, "Aw." But Pops, you're my witness. I had this in the notes before I'm saying it right now. I didn't change the notes or anything. One of the things I love about being a writer is meeting really awesome people, specifically at conferences. Real, live, honest to goodness people with flesh and blood and brains of their own, who can talk and who I have not created and I have not imagined in my mind, and I've not pulled them from the ether, but real people here. These conferences that we go to, there's something innately satisfying about commonalities, sharing something with others, something that you care very deeply about, a passion that you have, and being able to congregate, to join together and to study the craft, to get better at it, to challenge each other, to encourage each other. That's what I really like, is that other writers, the community of writers that I've met that have been encouraging and supportive. And we all need that. Writing is a difficult game. And if you don't have someone cheering you on in your corner, it can be far more difficult. And so being able to know that there are others out there who are struggling with the same things that you're struggling with, who are celebrating the same victories that you're celebrating, who will encourage you and say, "I've been there," who will give you some good, solid advice and say, "Here's how you can handle this particular thing." I've met some real good, long time, I would say lifetime friends at these conferences, and just in the business of writing. Some editors, my editor is one of my favorite people on the planet, Bethany. I know you're out there. You're awesome. Just genuinely quality, good people. Eddie Jones from Lighthouse Publishing of the Carolinas. I mean, and everybody, pretty much everybody I've ever worked with in this business has been a pleasure to work with. Even when we don't see eye to eye on certain things, we can still agree that
That I'm
there's a
right.
higher calling. Yeah, there's a higher calling, and that calling is Pops.
Yeah.
So pick up your phone, guys, because when Pops calls, that is a higher call, and you got to take it. So, but yeah, being able to interact with others who understand where you're coming from. So,
Yeah, and being part of that community is very encouraging. Uh, I love hanging out with other writers because I don't like to be the only weird one. But then you see the things that you sit with a few best-selling novelists, and you think, well, man, these guys have just hit the gold mine. They reached for the star and they grabbed it. Then you find out they're insecure. They have doubts as to whether or not they'll ever be able to do the work again. And it goes on and on with that. I remember I was in Michigan and had a publisher up there, and they brought all their novelists in, and I was still a very new novelist, and so some of the people there were bestsellers, and I was a little intimidated. But we'd be sitting around breakfast, and I was sitting with this one lady who was a bestseller, well known, very recognizable name, and she was just beside herself because she couldn't solve a problem in her book. It was too difficult. She just knew this was the end. And she's having this meltdown. Yet she's one of the best known writers in her genre. So it's kind of fun to see that they're just really average folks who have a gift and discipline to be able to get the book done.
indeed.
So, well, on to my next one then, which I believe is my fourth one here. And one of the things I love about writing is problem solving. I like to fix things. I collect typewriters, and one of the things I like about them is I like to fix them, make them work again, give them new life, make them so that they'll last another 50 to 100 years. I like the idea of solving a problem, and every tale has its own set of problems. It's going to be different every book. It's never the same. And solving those problems with skill is a challenge. That's half the fun. It's an athlete trying to run a little bit faster than before. It's someone trying to climb a mountain, but choosing a different path to see if that's a little faster. Just love the idea of solving the problems. Plots always have plot holes when you start. Usually you can't fix them all. There's a few very skilled outliners that might get it all done before they start. But most of the time in the writing, something else will come up. Now you got to solve that problem. Characters want to be something you don't want them to be, something other than you planned, and they're very hard to tame. And it's usually the author who gets tamed in it. There's new twists that come out of nowhere, things you don't see coming. Even again, for those who outline, they think they have it all figured out and then later have to change. That's not unusual. They understand that when they go in. So sometimes writing fiction is more wrestling than composition. It's wrestling with the problems, trying to fix them, learning to wait on a solution. We go back to Stephen King's Boys in the Basement. I've had many problems that I've had to just stew on. Just wait. I knew there was an answer out there, and one of the most memorable ones, I just couldn't solve a plot problem, and I take my wife out to dinner. We go to this lovely place, barbecue joint down in Ontario, California, and we're having a good time, and we're chatting. I remember sitting right where we were sitting, and I looked down at the rug, and I'm looking at the rug, and all of a sudden the answer comes to me. I took myself out of the writing place, went out to an enjoyable place, and then all of a sudden the answer came to me while I was looking at the rug. It had nothing to do with the rug, but I just remember staring at the rug, and I think it was great because my wife didn't bother to interrupt. She's seen this before, where I disappear, not visually, but I just disappear in front of her. And all of a sudden there's an answer. I had one driving down a road, not far from where you live. Mm-hmm. Couldn't figure this thing out for anything. And all of a sudden, boom, that hit me right over the railroad tracks on the way into Phelan. And then the idea came to me, and it's in the book. So new twists come out of nowhere. You have to learn to deal with them, use them. So that's half the fun is solving the problem. In fact, in one of my books, I remember probably spending half a day walking through the house trying to figure out the physical movements of one of the characters at a crucial scene and how to get them to do that and how it would be realistic and then what would happen next. And I tried all kinds of stuff before the answer came. So the problem solving is fun.
It's the fox, chicken, and chicken with the bag of corn, right? On one side of the river that you got to take over to the other side. You know what I'm talking about?
No idea what you're talking about.
You haven't heard that one? It's a riddle. Not a riddle. It's I guess a brain teaser or whatever. It's a puzzle where you got a fox, a chicken, and a bag of corn on one side of the river. You got one boat. You got to get them all to the other side. But you can't leave the fox with the chicken because the fox will eat the chicken. Can't leave the chicken with the feed because the chicken will eat the feed. So how do you get them all across? And so you go through this process. There's a way to do it. Now everybody's going to think about it. I'm not going to tell you how to solve it. You got to figure it out. Don't Google it. Don't cheat.
No problem. There's the internet. No problem.
Yeah. Don't do that. But that, like you say, it's problem solving. It's working your characters into a tizzy, into a difficult situation and watching them kind of find the way out. You're describing some of your eureka moments. I've had some of my eureka moments too. I like to bounce ideas off other writers, off my wife specifically, who is not necessarily another writer, but she's one of the smartest people, if not the smartest person I've ever met. And so I'll be talking to her. I'll say, I'm stuck in my book. Now, granted, she hasn't read page 1 of this book, but I'm like, I'm just stuck. I don't know how to do this particular thing. And she'll say, well, what about this? And she starts throwing out ideas. And I say, no, that'll never work. No, you don't. But wait a minute. If I take that idea and I change it a little bit, and then, if I go over here and I change that, and then I can, and all of a sudden, all the pieces fall together. And it's not necessarily anything that she's suggested. It's just the breadth of stuff that she suggests and how her mind works and comes at it from different angles. Just having another perspective sometimes is all that we need, because we can get locked into our own perspectives and forget that we need to look at a situation from all sides. And that can be fun to do that and to look back at your work and have I left anything for my characters to use to solve this situation? Do I need to put anything in on revision? And things of that nature. It's fun. Pops, I still remember going up to Fresno with you. I think it was Thanksgiving. It may have been our day trip, our Thanksgiving day trip. Do you remember that? Drove up to Fresno.
Yeah, you had a football thing, I think, or something, wasn't it? Or
it was something like, I don't think it was football, because my football thing, we didn't get to go up to Fresno at all because I practiced all the way through Thanksgiving.
That's right. Yeah.
But it was like one year that for whatever reason, our schedules just didn't work. And we had to go up. We drove up a 4-hour trip to Fresno in the morning, had Thanksgiving dinner, drove 4 hours back that night. And we had an audio tape of brain teasers and riddles. That's one of my favorite memories of you and I together, is just driving over through the Tehachapis. We'd listen to the puzzle and we'd pause it and we'd work it out. And then some of them we figured out, some of them we didn't. There were a couple where I'm pretty sure they were just wrong, but I liked my answers better. But it's very satisfying to work hard at something and to come up with a solution. It can be very satisfying. So yeah, I remember a lot of my eureka moments as well. Those are definitely fun. So for me, the last thing that on my list, there's plenty of other things that didn't quite make the list, but what do I love about writing? I love falling in love, soaring high on feathered wings. I love climbing mountains and diving deep beneath the surface of the ocean. I get to do all of it when I write. Everything that I will never get to do in my life, I get to experience. I get to skydive, even though I'll never, ever skydive. I get to, get in fights, which, I get in fights all the time, but imagination fights. So it's a process of specific guided imagination. There's no substitute. It's the closest thing that you'll ever get to an altered reality kind of, video game, if you will. You get to inhabit a new character, you get to inhabit a new life situation, you get to struggle and overcome, and you get to experience all those types of things. And it's very satisfying in that regard to be able to displace, to engage your imagination. I think it actually makes us more intelligent because we're more creative, and we do have to find situations to challenging puzzles and things of that nature. I love being surprised by my creations and experiencing what my characters get to experience. It's a lot of fun.
And my last one is this. One of the things I love is maturing into a better writer. And I've told this story, so I'm not going to tell it for very long to get to it. I was feeling very bad because I've been reading some Dean Koontz books, and he's just an excellent tactician and craftsman. And I said, I'll never be even close to this good. But then I went down to a bookstore. I think me mentioned this just recently, and you remember bookstores, and found the earliest books that he had written, and they weren't anywhere near good. Of course, he was writing a ton of books just to get by. He was writing under different names. But the point was, for me, is he learned to be a writer and become better and better and better. And that's what we're doing when we're writing. We're becoming better and better. So maturing into a better writer, I republish some of my books that go out of print, and I always go over them because I want to kind of bring them up to my current style, but I also want to keep them somewhat like I wrote them for the history of it, I suppose. But every story, every novel is a college education. It makes you better, new things to learn, not just facts and figures, but new ways of approaching things. Some lessons are easier to learn than others. There's an odd mix of regret and joy in finishing a book. The general joke is when you write the end and you go, hoo, I finished another book. Now they're going to know I can't write. It's immediately followed by depression. So it's kind of an odd mix. You regret that the book has ended, but boy, you're happy that it's ended. You just have to put up with it. So usually you just start another project. But the other thing is when you get to the end and you send the thing off, you start thinking, I can do better. Maybe I could be doing it this way. And so I have an old saying, people ask how many books I've written, and I tell them I've written a lot of books. And someday I hope to write a good one. And that's partially true. I want to write a really good book someday. So I keep trying, keep working at it, keep learning, and maybe someday I'll write a really good book.
I think you've already written several really good books, and I know the chat room is going to go ahead and agree with me. But I see what you're saying. I get the spirit of what you're saying is that we are always trying to improve ourselves, to better ourselves. I think every artist feels that way. Our next painting is going to be our best. Our next sculpture is going to be our best. Our next song is going to be our best. And really just trying to take what we've learned from past mistakes and build off of those, correct those mistakes, and build a stronger foundation. Imagine what I can do now that I know how to do A, B, and C. That process is really good and very positive. So even though we have written good books, Pops, I'm going to say that you've written good books. We always want to challenge ourselves to do better. So you're talking about sending a book off or being done with a book. I don't know if you would agree with this. You would have much more insight to it, but than I do. But I always liken it to sending a kid off to college or having a kid move out. You've lived with it for so long, watching it grow, watching it develop, pouring your life experience into it, trying to train it up into the way it should go, hoping that it will become a writer just like you someday, and maybe start a podcast featuring you on it so that you can still see.
No one would ever do that.
No, but you're excited for the possibilities of it being out in the world, but you're also a little nervous about it being out in the world. Is it really ready for the world? Did I do a good enough job? Should I have changed this or that? So there's definitely some mixed emotions with that. Is that kind of your experience, Pops?
Yeah, it's an odd thing, and I think it's because the imagination never relaxes. Just because we finished something, and you've heard me talk about this, you should always have more ideas than you can possibly write. As soon as you're done with that, you relax a little bit, maybe take a couple of days off and start getting a little edgy. Of course, you're going to have to go through edits and stuff like that, but you start thinking, there's got to be something I can do. And I have found myself doing different things. I go to movies and stuff like that, but that's horrible because then I start thinking of other ideas to write about. So it doesn't stop. Even I've been taking a bit of a hiatus in the writing, but the ideas keep coming.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. So, well, that's about all that we have for tonight. We're a little bit early. We got here some comments from the chat room. We got a question. We got some comments. A lot of comments right now about YouTube going down, Pops. So my hope is that this will still, I mean, it says we're live. Everything says we're still good. So hopefully this will still upload okay in its entirety. And if you've been disconnected or you haven't been able to view it, then be patient. Hopefully it'll be up on YouTube again tomorrow in its entirety if you've missed portions of it. So sorry about that. It's not our fault. Repair monkeys are apparently working on it from what we see in the chat room. But we do have one question. This is from Dave. Have you ever done a character who you discovered was 99% like a real person you know? For me, I don't think I have. I think most of my characters feel in ways like people I know, but not always. I make it a point to not base characters on real people personally.
Yeah, I agree. I've had a couple of times where somebody's come and told me, I know who you're talking about and who that character is based on. Not based on anyone. Character came out of my mind and I can't see the relationship. They'll tell me, I go, no, they're not anything alike. One's a man, one's a woman. So, right there's a difference. And so no, I don't do that at all. I don't plan to do that. I don't think I've ever done it by accident. They're going to have some characters that are just going to be naturally like other characters. I have done physical descriptions based on certain characters. Occasionally, an actor, it's got a very unique face or something like that. Don't do that often, but I've done that before.
Yeah. And I mean, there's only so many different descriptions you can give before someone sounds like someone else, physically perhaps, or even their behavior. There's only so many personality types. I don't think I've inadvertently written about somebody with the same background as anyone I know. I mean, I write YA fiction a majority of the time, and I don't write about any students in my classroom. It would make sense if I did, but I just don't do it.
I was going to say there's probably several you'd like to, but
yeah, we don't talk about that. Anyhow, so I did ask the chat room what they enjoyed about writing, and I think we got some answers in before chaos ensued with YouTube. So Sophia Hansen says she loves playing with words to create new words. Those are called neologisms, by the way, and they're a lot of fun.
Mr. MFA.
Yeah, check out wordsthatAren't.com. I think it's .com. Maybe Google it first. Words that aren't, AREN', except no apostrophe. A buddy of mine runs that site. He's got a bunch of neologisms that are ridiculously good and funny, and he does little blog posts about them as well. So that's a lot of fun. So that's what Sophia Hansen loves. Dave Fessenden says he likes that feeling of writing something that expresses what he wanted to say but never was able to say it, and that's mostly nonfiction, but sometimes in fiction too. I would agree with that. I love saying things in a unique way, a memorable way, finding a new turn of phrase, finding a new description instead of a tired old cliche, really challenging myself in that regard. So yeah, Dave, good stuff. Tess likes living in the world that she writes about, doing the research, and learning about the people who, quote, occupy her head. Well, I don't know, Tess, if you got voices in your head,
keep them.
I hope they're interesting. That's all I can say. And hopefully they're not violent. So we all have voices in our head. Lawrence says he loves the exploration and adventure in a fantasy world. He says, I summed it up pretty well. I don't want to brag, but I got you.
You're going to anyway.
I got you, Lawrence. So, and then, there's that. So that is all that we have. Pops, do you have anything before we sign off?
No, I think that's about it.
All right. Well, we will be back in a couple of weeks. So we thank you all for listening. Don't forget to check us out. If you're looking for Pops, you can find him at altongansky.com. You can find Molly, if you miss her, at franklymydearmojo.com. And you can always find me at aarongansky.com, where you can find the show notes and as early as tomorrow, provided that everything is still working. So we thank you all for listening. And until next week, good writing.